Gary DePaul with Unlabeled Leadership. Welcome to episode 117. Host Leadership Picks, Judy Hale, Patrick Ward, and Chip Baker. Here's a shout out to listeners in Wisconsin, specifically Lake Geneva, Fond du Lac, Osseo, Waunakee, and Waukesha. With that, let's get started. For the past 11 months, I've had the privilege of talking with several incredible guests. They've shared personal stories about leadership and given advice as well. As a way to celebrate, I went back to the first half of the year and picked 3 segments that I thought were highly meaningful and stories that you might want to hear again. So what you're about to hear are repeats from previous episodes. Part 1, Judy Hale, her dad, Divergence, and looking for the brown suit. In episode 4, Judy Hale talks about her dad and shares a concept called the brown suit. I found the concept intriguing, and I thought you as a listener might want to hear it again if you haven't heard it. Here's Judy with her story.
And one of the first one was actually from my dad, and I was in high school. And my dad told me this story. He said, Judy, when you go into the room, you're looking for the brown suit. He said,
Okay.
You can always tell the health of an organization by whether or not there's a brown suit in the room. Now, please understand, my dad, he was in business where the men wore black suits, navy suits, white shirts, plain ties, And he always looked for the guy whose jacket didn't match his pants. He always looked for the guy who dared to wear a Hawaiian tie or a pink shirt. By the way, there were only men at his, please understand, this is in history. But that concept of the brown suit, because you need to know that my dad was the brown suit. My dad was a genius, but he was also illiterate in the fact that he didn't get to go to school. So his job was to calculate the fuel needs the United States Air Force during World War II, Korea and Nam. When he gave his letter of resignation, they hired 5 PhDs in math to replace him. You see, because he was illiterate, he couldn't communicate how he solved the problems, but he could solve them. And his point was, Judy, if the leaders can't tolerate anyone who looks different, thinks different, acts different, they're not healthy. They can't grow. They can't adapt. They can't move. And his point was that he was one of the brown suitors, and he looked and needed a boss who wanted to enable him and not compete with him. And with that story, one of the other things he told me, he came home one day and he had a bounce to his step and a smile on his face. And I said, "Hey, Dad, what's going on?" He said, "It was a good day." I said, "What happened?" He said, "I got a new boss, and he doesn't know what I do, and he won't be in my face."
Nice.
And one of their core things had to do with technical competency. And I thought this is interesting because leaders don't need to compete with their people. In your principles, this has to do with giving up control and believing in others.
When Judy said my principles, what she's referring to are the 7 guiding principles that I found when doing my leadership research. Giving up control, believing in others are 2 of the principles. I'll talk about these in future episodes. Here's Judy again.
And my dad, he just needed a boss who believed in him, who enabled him to do these incredible mathematical calculations with the benefit of a pencil and yellow paper, not a computer, nothing else, because he could do it. Anyway, his whole concept of the brown suit, I realized I'm frequently the brown suit myself. I don't look like, I don't talk like, I don't see what other people do. That doesn't make me a leader. It means that clients that can't tolerate that divergent view, be open to new dialogue, new perspectives, they're not providing the guidance necessary for their people to grow and be innovative. And by the way, innovation is a new currency. It's going to be a new currency for this decade. Anyway, that's my story. I realized that a story that I heard in high school, how pervasive that would be my entire life. I looked for it now in my clients. I'll fire a client that doesn't have a brown suit in the room, doesn't have any sense of divergency. I see it in Google, one of my clients. I've been there numerous times. The level of collaboration, acceptance is incredible. Everybody in the room knows that they're smart. Everybody in the room knows that they were invited because everybody else knows they're smart. And everybody in the room knows that everybody else in the room is smart. And they know that the collaborative solution will be better than what any one of them could do. It's fascinating how they set up this culture. Well, that's leadership that enables that. That's letting go. And one of your principles is, I think it has to do with believing in others, but it's really letting go of control, not pre-predicting how we're supposed to behave, how we're supposed to do the problem, but allowing and fostering people to come up with innovative approaches to doing things.
When you talk about your clients, the people you work with, if they don't have the brown suit, they may not be a good fit for you. And in coaching in that area, there's a lot of coaches that won't handle clients that don't want to be coached. They're not receptive, then they're not a good match. And it sounds like what you've picked up from your father has helped you manage the types of clients that you have, and knowing who would be good for you to work with and who would be receptive of what you have to offer.
You need to know that I evaluate my clients as much as they evaluate me. And if I don't see any evidence that they really are receptive, I usually either will say I don't have time, or I'll give them the name of my competitor. By the way, I've had competitors call me up and say, what's real skinny for you? What's wrong with these people? Because they're not a good fit for me.
Part 2, Patrick Ward, Pandemic, Mental Pressure, and the Daily Stand-Up. The pandemic has been extremely challenging for businesses. Several have had to rethink how they operated and reinvent themselves. Faculty at universities and colleges had to figure out how to teach at a distance. Several managers had to learn how to work with remote teams when they're so used to working in person. Unfortunately, a lot of managers did not do a good job helping their teams with the mental pressures that they've had to face. In this part, Patrick Ward talks about how he handled the pandemic and supported his team in a positive way. Patrick has some brilliant insight into the pandemic and working with people at a distance. Here's Patrick to explain.
Needless to say, the pandemic has been a massive disruptor.
Yeah.
It wasn't a huge disruption to me compared to a lot of others. I myself had experience as a digital nomad. I used to be a copywriter and I lived and worked around Southeast Asia for a long time. So that world of communicating to people virtually, that wasn't new. But what was new about the pandemic for me is that I was being responsible for a team, and I was acutely aware of the mental health pressures that were going to come out of the pandemic. Obviously, we were all very fortunate. We were still employed. We were in an industry, namely technology, that allows us to do our work remotely. But I knew that going into this pandemic, this is around March of 2020, that I needed to step up as a leader, not just taking for granted that people were going to be able to be as productive as they were. Because either they were going to be extra productive, but then closer to burnout, or they were going to be less productive because they were feeling scared, worried about their situation. So I instituted a very simple procedure, and it was a daily stand-up. And it started at 9 a.m. in the morning, a half hour, and it was specifically set with the expectations. This is not to talk about work. If you want to bring up something about work or a task or a blocker you have, you can. But really, it's just an open space for our team to gather and talk about what's going on in the world, keep socializing with one another. Now, the funny thing is about every one of our team members is in a different space. I was in LA. My content manager was in New York. My demand generation manager was in New Jersey. I had an account manager down in Uruguay. So we're all separate. At the time, I thought this is a very simple process. It just keeps the camaraderie. This is a good thing. What I didn't realize the impact of this until much later in the year, probably around December of 2020 when we were doing performance reviews. I got the feedback from my team members who said the daily stand-up was the thing that kept me psychologically sane during this year.
Wow.
That was a powerful moment to realize that this small little task of meeting 30 minutes a day was what kept people connected with one another, was what helped us be super productive, but also just genuinely happy during what was otherwise a pretty horrific year by all accounts. I think if you asked anyone, was 2020 their favorite year of their life, most people would probably say no. It was just a really nice moment for me to see that, leadership doesn't have to be the biggest grandstanding statements or proclamations. Sometimes it can just be in a simple human-based interaction that is done day to day.
Before the pandemic hit, was your team already remote?
So some of us were remote, but a large percentage of us was here in LA. While we weren't, and we were still doing a couple of days a week remotely, so it wasn't totally foreign to us. I think what was really foreign to us is that inability to go outside.
Yeah.
That really obviously hits in a different way. It's not so much that we're communicating with each other differently, it's just that the entire context around that was different. And so I think where this manifested itself in those daily meetings is any one of our employees felt comfortable saying, hey guys, like I'm not feeling it today. Or I'm not creative today. And we would adjust. We would adjust each day by day. I think that was really important for everyone to feel okay with not always being 100% productive. Because I think the in-person world that we were in prior to the pandemic made this artificial expectation. Oh, you have to put in 8 hours of work a day. Well, newsflash, most statistics say that you get about 57% of an employee's workday actually dedicated to quote unquote constructive work. Like the human mind is just incapable of working like a machine 8 hours at the exact same productivity level all day.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that, and that's okay. When I focus on my team members, I listen and learn what is their ideal working style. One guy I have prefers to set aside some writing time, put himself, in a closet, if you will, and just write for 4 hours. I'm like, okay, I'll create the space for you to do that. Another one prefers more constant interaction and brainstorming. Okay, I'll set up additional meetings so we can do that. But that's the key with leadership, learning how each person individually has their own personality style, their own working style, and just allowing that to flourish in your organization so that you can get the absolute best out of each individual employee.
And having that knowledge is what enables you to provide the support to remove barriers and also to enable them to express when I guess make it safe for them to express when they're too exhausted or when something personal is going on so that it's okay to say that. And it sounds like your whole team is very adaptable.
Well, here's the big reason why I do that. It's funny, when I speak with other people, they almost are shocked that, wow, you would ask your employees and you would be happy when they say, hey, I'm not feeling so good today, or I've got a personal issue come up. I love that for a specific reason, because when I was an employee, I remember feeling that disgruntlement and not expressing it to my manager until the day that there's my 2 weeks notice. And I am terrified of that happening to me as a leader. I constantly want to be making myself available, making myself supportive to my employees so that they can always come to me with a problem so we can talk about it, tackle it before it's an issue, before it comes to a case of, here's my 2 weeks notice. I would hope that if any of my employees ever did leave to go on to bigger and better things, I would have known about it well in advance, because that to me is truly about building a transparent, honest trust between manager and employee.
This is the part where I would say, Amen. I wanted to go back and briefly just comment on something you said that struck me, that when the pandemic was starting, when everyone was going remote, you were concerned that some people would become too productive and experience burnout, and some people would be less productive just because of all that's going on around them. And I think that's extremely insightful that a lot of people missed when all this was starting.
Well, first of all, there was the denial. Everyone thought, I heard the same sort of things that will be done by June.
Yeah.
I certainly knew that wasn't going to be the case. My mother is a medical professional, and I asked her, how long is it going to be till a vaccine? And she's like, 12 to 18 months. Okay, there we go. So that's how long minimum we've got to deal with this. And so then I'm thinking, what are the psychological ramifications of us not being able to have these incidental social interactions? Because we forget that. We forget that when you're in the office, we have a term for it, the water cooler conversation, right?
Yeah.
Just, even if you don't speak to a lot of people that much, maybe you've got your head down on a project, you still do have these little micro social interaction. As soon as you go fully remote, and I knew this implicitly as a digital nomad, unless you carve out deliberate time for it, you will not have that. And so it's really important to think about, hey, if you're an introvert and you don't want to speak to many people, that's great. But I knew, being in marketing, and therefore a lot of my marketing team are extroverts, and they're going to need that social interaction, that social support. Just because work can be done remotely, and obviously there are arguments for and against remote work, you've still got to tailor your approach to it. I've seen too many friends of mine who have been in the unfortunate situation of being inundated with meetings, expected to do all the same work they were doing in an in-person capacity. And suddenly, what does that mean? They're working 10, 12, 14-hour days. I have no interest in any of my team doing that, because I will burn them out to the point that either they are not productive or they leave the organization. And we all know that is a very costly thing, not only for the employee to leave with all their institutional knowledge, for the costs that it takes for hiring someone new. It's just much easier and better for everyone if you retain happy, healthy employees.
Part 3, Chip Baker, Do Your Best, Transactional and Transformational. In this part, Chip Baker talks about growing up, the support of his family, his superhero mother, and that leads into an unusual conversation about Chick-fil-A, which is a reference to a video that Chip has, which you can find on his YouTube channel. We end up talking about the difference between being transactional and transformational. Here's Chip with his story.
I grew up with a superhero in my house, which is my mother.
Ah.
Right? One amazing lady, just great lady in the community, great lady for kids, great lady for people, did some awesome things. And so I was able to see what superhero actions in my house by my mother. And so I was a young guy, can't remember the age, but I remember her telling me to go do something in the house.
Yeah.
And I didn't do it up to her expectations, which was probably not very good, honestly. And, and she says in the voice, boy, if you're going to do something, you make sure you do it right or don't waste your time.
Yeah.
And so I've taken that in everything that I do in my life. I wear many hats. I've worn many hats in my life. I've just strived to do things the right way throughout my life. I'm so thankful that I was taught that lesson at a young age, because I think that it's truly helped me, because I can't just give half effort to nothing I do.
That becomes a guiding principle for you in how you approach tasks, situations, and I get it.
Oh, yes. And really, it forms your habit.
Yeah.
And what it does is it makes you have great success habits. And then from there, habits develop into amazing routines. And when you have great routines in your life, it makes you consistent. It allows you to be consistent and have consistency in your life. And what that does, there's two things. It builds trust. And so there's two types of trust that it builds. The first, others around you trust you because they know what they're going to get from you. Like, they know that they can depend on you. They know that if they ask you to do something, boy, it's going to be done right. Right. And so, and then the other thing is it brings about self-trust because you've shown yourself that you've been disciplined to do the little things the right way. And it gives you the confidence that you need to attack anything that you're going to face, because you've already been through some things. And you've been through it by just doing the little things the right way with your habits, with your routines, which makes you consistent. Now you trust that. Bring it on. Bring the challenge on. Let's go. I'm going to attack it. Let's go.
Chip, I can't help but as you're talking, thinking of little things that I did not do.
Yeah. Yes.
As I think it's a great reminder. And I love how you talk about the two types of trust, and in particular, the self-trust. And it is a way of building your character and modeling to other people how to build character.
Oh, indeed. When you do that, you get opportunities from that as well, because opportunities bring opportunity.
Yes.
Come on. Come on.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, like I talked about the whole trust deal, people want people that do things right on their teams. So when you are a person that is conscientious, have morals, have character to do the little things the right way, you're going to get opportunities because people see that. And I can tell you the jobs that I've had in my life, most of the jobs, a lot of the opportunities I've had, it's not because of Chip Baker's skills, because there's a whole lot of people out there more talented than me, probably. I've gotten opportunities based on because somebody else thought highly of me, or somebody saw something that I did, was like, man, that's pretty good stuff.
Yeah.
And then I got an opportunity from that. And so, not that I was even seeking the opportunities. All I know is my mama said, boy, you better do things the right way or don't waste your time. And so that's what I've tried to do.
When you're doing things the right way and you're striving for that, it is a way of influencing others and influencing them in a way that opens up opportunities that may not have been there before. So I like that.
I'm glad that you said that, because we all have people that are depending on us. We all have people that are looking up to us. Even if we don't choose to be in those shoes, there are people looking to us for guidance or leadership.
Yeah, even ourselves.
Right, exactly. It makes us push ourselves even harder to step outside our comfort zone, to be the best version of ourselves for those people, which is our why.
Yes.
It's our why. And then when we understand our why, it allows us to live a life intentional and on purpose every day, every moment of every day, which, man, it influences and impacts so many people.
There are a lot of people who go through life, and I'm going to borrow from one of your videos, that they live their life very transactional. But when you're deliberate, I'm thinking of Chick-fil-A. You're transformational in what you do. I love it.
Hey, my pleasure.
I learned from you.
My pleasure. And it's so true. I mean, that was an experience in my life that influenced me. It made me see that it's important to be transformational over transactional. Transformational allows you to not just leave a legacy, but live a legacy by your day-to-day actions. Transactional is just surface level, and we don't want to live that way. We want to go deep and do things the right way with everything we do.
The story that you told about that really highlighted it is when you went into a store and the cashier just went through the motions, did the stuff, followed the procedure precisely. Yes. Did it exactly. And so great. But you went to Chick-fil-A, they acted. And I think that I really believe that they believe that, because I do have a nephew who worked there.
Yeah.
They sincerely welcomed you and were happy to see you.
Yeah, they don't even know me, but they are smiling. Man, they made my day better. So, besides the point that I was getting great food, which, it's awesome food there.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm a food guy. But when I left that transformational experience, I left being better and better equipped to go make more of a positive difference in our world because of that transformational interaction. And really, we all have the opportunity each day. I don't care who you are, where you're at, whatever you've been through. We all have the opportunity to make transformational differences in the lives of the people that we're around every moment of every day.
When you can see the difference and you actually consciously think about transaction versus transformational, that becomes another type of guiding principle.
Yes, indeed.
I'd like to thank Judy Hale, Patrick Ward, and Chip Baker. If you'd like to learn more about them or want to hear the full episodes, go to the show notes. If you have a question or comment, go to unlabelleadership.com, click the message icon, and you can leave a voicemail message for up to 1 minute. I'd like to thank those who support the show. Your contributions makes a difference because this is a volunteer service. I'd like to thank you for listening. This is Gary DePaul. Until next time, lead on.